Welcome. My name is Colleen Tauke, and I'm the sewing specialist at Fonts and Porter. In this Quilting Quickly tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make the placemats and items in the project called Christmas Gatherings. If you'd like to purchase this pattern, visit our website. Okay, we're going to get started. We're making a wonderful selection of Christmas prints into placemats. You'll have some left to make some hot pads and maybe even some coasters if you'd like. The inspiration came from these wonderful Christmas prints with gold glitz to them. We always like to bring out the holiday time. So we're going to be using 2.5-inch strips to create a placemat that looks like this. We're going to be cutting, according to our pattern instructions, the length of bars that are used in this. This is a quilt as you go project, so that when you're finished putting the binding on, it's going to be a breeze. There's no step of going back to quilt because as you construct them, you're actually quilting them. We're using a placemat craft pack like this. It comes in different shapes. Here we're using the rectangle with the rounded corners, and it's a foam type product, but it's fusible on top and bottom. So that helps out in keeping our fabrics in place. I've got one started here. What I've done is taken one placemat form and I've ironed a piece of fabric to the back. You see, I just use a simple red for the back of my placemat, and you just follow the instructions on how long to heat and what temperature the iron needs to be. But you can heat through this. Don't worry about, you can put down a heat-resistant pressing mat, but when I heated this, I didn't really use one. The adhesive on this side didn't warm that much, so it did not stick to my ironing surface. It just heated the back, and you can see there it's adhered. So we've got that in place. Then what you want to do, this is a tip for watching the video, is you're going to want to go and take your scissors and you're going to want to trim all the way around, just following that form, so that later you'll know the shape and you'll understand in a second when we get to putting the strips on what I mean by trimming here, so you'll know your shape of your finished placemat. So just trim the scissors like this around the outer edge. I won't do the whole thing, but now you understand. So now we're going to be measuring the 18-inch placemat. Half mark would be 9 inches. So here I used a friction pen. You can use a chalk liner, something so that you can see where the center of the placemat is. Now that would be the center line when we have the construction done. But remember, we have seam allowances. So we're going to go 1/4 inch to either side, doesn't matter which side, but to one side of that center line. And then we're going to be using our strips that I've gone ahead and cut mine. The center strip falls on the gold on this one, so we'll make one looking just like the one laying out here. And if I were to place it at the center, the 1/4 inch seam allowance would come in and shift everything off. That's why we mark that 1/4 inch seam to one side. First strip I'm going to put in place is right side up like this. Then I'm going to take it to the iron. Remember, this is fusible, but also realize all of this is fusible too. So we're going to use the nose of the iron just to keep that one in place. So we're just touching down just the tip of the iron. This will be a temporary hold until we get everything stitched in place. So we just heat it just a little bit right down the center. So now it's kind of stuck in place. We got one there. The next fabric that I used is the large Christmas print, and it's going to be next to it, but in order to seam it, I'm going to put them right sides together, matching them up right along like this, and I'm just going to put a couple of pins in just to hold them in place. And you'll have to get through the layers there just a little bit, so they don't shift when you go to the sewing machine. 3 ought to do it. Now, you're going to create a 1/4 inch seam down the center of the placemat. Now, when you go to a sewing machine and you've got all these layers, you're going to be thinking, set up your sewing machine differently. You need a walking foot or an even feed foot like this machine is set up here. And then you're going to want to, this ruler out of the way, take this over to the sewing machine and create that 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to twist this so I think about where my 1/4 inch seam is. On this machine, I actually have a laser light that I can set up to run along the outer edge of my fabric, so I'll know where my 1/4 inch is. If you need to mark from where your needle goes into the fabric onto your presser foot, put a little mark with that. You can just touch it with a Sharpie. It'll give you that guide for the 1/4 inch seam. Because we're sewing in the middle of a project like this, it's a little trickier to think about where your 1/4 inch seam actually is at. You can also set your stitch length. As this is quilting through all these layers, you can set your stitch length just a little bit longer at about a 3.0 or 3.5. It might be kind of hard to pick up, but there's a red thread line there, 1/4 inch seam all the way across my placemat. Now I'm going to open up these fabrics all the way to the seam, and you'll see that it's stitched along the back. That's my quilting. Put that first bar on, and then I'm going to take it to the ironing board. Remember that the material that you're using as your batting in your placemat is fusible, so again, just the nose of your iron will hold this in place. And now you've got the technique. You just keep repeating that across the placemat. The next one would go in line. See how you want to make sure this is opened up all the way so this stays a straight line. You don't want to leave a ditch there. You would put your next fabric on, right sides together, 1/4 inch seam, flip it open, iron it in place till you get across one side, and then work on the other side. I've got one here that's half done. Now, when I was talking about trimming away that backing fabric here, now you'll see why. If this was trimmed away, then I'll know where to trim this off. If I leave this as a sandwich, I can't feel the edge of the placemat is cleanly, and so that it's easier to trim. Trim that back first, and then come back and you'll trim away the extras. You would keep repeating to put the bars all the way across. I wanted one side done here so that you can see it's all fused in place, stitched, machine quilted down through the layers there. Then after you've finished this side, you would come in and put your binding on, and you'll notice that since we've got a curved outer edge, we need to use bias binding, which has a little bit of give to it. And I just wanted to walk you through visually putting the binding on. The reason why we need bias binding is because when we get to these curves out here, that lays nicely when we're stitching it on, and it will roll back and create this perfectly flat curve. You don't want to stretch this as you're putting it on. You want to just gently nudge along. You may want to pin it if you're new to putting on bias binding, but you don't want to stretch it as it runs in the corner, or you'll get a cupped corner and it won't lay flat. It'll curl on you. So bias binding all the way around, and you can complete 4 of those for a set. Now you're going to have a few strips left, so we thought, let's take it a little bit further. You can take the same method of flip and stitch across the project, but you can cut, according to your pattern instructions, pieces of Insulbright to use for placemat or for hot pads for decorating in your kitchen, so you'll have a holiday festival feel all the way through your kitchen. Do at least 1 or 2 layers of this, add a couple of layers of also a cotton batting to make sure that that's nice and heat resistant, and use the same style of binding for that project. And then the product that you use inside your placemats also makes a coaster set that's fusible. They're a little finer, thinner, because a coaster you don't want your cup or your glass to teeter on. So in this case, I used the remaining pieces. I cut squares, made simple 4 patches, fused them to both sides, nice and flat, and used my leftover binding to do the coasters too. For more of our video tutorials, visit our website. Thanks for joining me.